In the still of night, something has stirred. A rumbling of stone, a flash of light, the dawn of hope. Quiet though, or the whole world will know that everything has changed. But they don't know. They wake and they gather their spices and they meet at the appointed place at the appointed time. Early, just after sunrise. A sunrise like any other, heralding a new day. But they have no idea just how new this day is. How are they going to roll away the stone? Well, they are strong women. They have carried the weight of discipleship for years, both following and supporting their teacher. And there are quite a few of them. They won't have any trouble with the stone. But we ask, were there lots of women, as Luke and Mark say, or just Mary Magdalene, as John said, or just two Marys, like Matthew said? Well, a morning like this, so miraculous, so mysterious, is bound to be told from multiple perspectives, with various tellings bringing out different facets of an event that just can't fit into one narrative. And this morning, Luke is our guide. Luke, who has shone a spotlight on so many women throughout this gospel, he now brings a group of women together around the empty tomb. Because that is what they find. No stone to roll away, no body to anoint, no wounds to clean, no final farewell to their beloved teacher, just an empty tomb. And then two shiny men saying crazy things. Why do you look for the living among the dead? He is not here. He has risen. Remember that he told you this would happen? He told you and you thought he was talking in metaphors and riddles, but no, he really has risen. Don't look for the living among the dead. And we know, because John tells us, that Mary met Jesus there at the tomb. But this morning Luke is our guide. None of them tell the full story. We need all four. But this morning we go where Luke leads us, because we are looking for Jesus too, just like these women. We are looking for answers. We are looking for healing. We are looking for inspiration. We are looking for hope. And we are looking for peace. We are looking for Jesus. Don't look for him among the dead, but among the living. Presumably, the women told the disciples exactly what the angels had said. Don't look for the living among the dead. But what does Peter do? Peter, who can be relied on to do the wrong thing every time. Peter, the sort of person about whom people would have been always saying, well, his heart is in the right place. Peter immediately gets up and runs to look for the living among the dead at the tomb. But he is not there. But then where else was Peter supposed to look? He's not there, but where is he? And if these 12 verses were all we had, we would be left with that mystery. Jesus isn't in the empty tomb, but where has he gone? And Mark does that, just leaves us there. But no, Luke does not stop there. And this morning, Luke is our guide. Luke goes on to describe situations where the disciples do find Jesus. And you can grab a Bible and look up this next bit, or you can remember how that story of the Emmaus Road goes and what happens afterwards, or as a last resort, you can trust me. I am a doctor. Luke says, it's not among the dead, but among the living that Jesus is to be found. Among two disciples, as they walk and talk about Jesus' crucifixion, and among the whole gathering of disciples as they puzzle over these stories they are hearing about resurrection. Jesus is found among the living, as living people gather to remember him, and especially as they gather to reflect on the meaning of his death and resurrection. Jesus is found among living disciples as they gather in his name. And when Jesus met with them, he opened their eyes to understand the scriptures. He helped them read the scriptures as living word that could course through their veins and set their hearts on fire. Jesus is found where the living scriptures are read in a way that enters the very soul and transforms the gathered disciples from the inside out. And since Luke is our guide this morning, we let him direct us to one more place where he tells us Jesus is found. When was it in that Emmaus Road story that those disciples recognized Jesus? You remember, it was as he broke the bread. Breaking bread had a double meaning for those disciples, as it does for us. Breaking bread was an act of hospitality, welcoming people around your table, opening up as much or as little as you have and sharing it with all those who are gathered. There is a lot of hospitality in Luke, and all the Gospels make it clear that when we welcome and feed someone in Jesus' name, we are welcoming and feeding him. Jesus is to be found around a shared table where outsiders are welcomed in. Also, and more particularly, just a few days earlier, though it must have felt like a century to them, Jesus had broken bread and told them to think of it as his body given for them. And he told them to keep doing that regularly in remembrance of him. Jesus is to be found in the living tradition in which we remember him in his words and his symbols. Don't look for the living among the dead, look for him among the living. In the gathering of living disciples, in reading and reflecting together on living scriptures, in acts of life-sharing hospitality that welcome outsiders, and in the living tradition of remembering that Jesus gave us. And now we're getting even further ahead of ourselves, but after that meeting with the disciples, Jesus leaves them physically, and they're no longer able to literally touch him and give him food and eat food with him. But how is it just after that Luke ends his gospel? It's with these words: the disciples were continually in the temple, blessing God. They continued to look for the living among the living, in the place where people gathered to pray and hear the scriptures and observe the traditions God had given them. On Palm Sunday, I mentioned that by the time Luke wrote this gospel, the temple in Jerusalem had almost certainly already been destroyed. And yet he ends this gospel with the disciples in the temple. And he does that knowing that this would be touching an exposed nerve of their trauma. But Luke is a doctor, and his intention is to heal. It was no longer possible for those first readers to seek God in the Jerusalem temple. But Luke has gently guided them to the place where Jesus is to still be found, in the gathering of living disciples, in reading and reflecting together on the living scriptures, in acts of life-sharing hospitality where strangers are invited in, and in maintaining the living tradition that Jesus had given them. And that is great news, because it means that we can look for Jesus and find him anywhere, anytime. Even here in Ashgrove in 2022. Through Holy Week this year, we have been reflecting on a question that Jesus raised as he entered Jerusalem on Palm Sunday. He wept for that city because they did not know, they did not recognize the things that made for peace. And we have admitted that we also have trouble recognizing the things that make for peace. And we have trouble making peace. And so we notice that if we do follow Jesus to those places where he is to be found, according to Luke, if we gather with other disciples, if we read the scriptures together, not just criticize each other's interpretation, but to really listen to Jesus through listening to each other, as we offer hospitality to outsiders and welcome them with us to the Lord's table, then surely these things are the beginning of peace in a world of conflict. And we can experience this peace that he brings as we meet him in those places, because he is risen. He is risen indeed.